The conclusion from the last video, never stated with the clarity that I am going to state it now, is simply this. It is difficult for a feudal government or a feudal country to wage modern war. It will lose its essential characteristic if it does. Its essential characteristic is the principle of birth, or birth determining your place in the political order. When birth determines your place, those who win favor with the well-born get the places of office, and those folks are not always promoted based on merit. They act without alacrity, knowing that the things are bound to remain the same. They are reluctant to embrace technologies as those things threaten their existence in an immobile order. They believe in the ultimate triumph of character and courage, as against the technical solutions supplied by things like railroads. They may even trust the honorableness of mankind, so they wouldn't think of coding their messages. This is the Russians as they step forward to this war. The Germans, by contrast, have a modern, competitive, democratic approach underneath some of the forms of feudal monarchy. This is not a fair fight. We do not only see the feudal incompetence of the army, we also see, in Chapter 15, the revolutionary presence in the army itself, in the person of Ensign Leonardovich, who wants Russia to do as badly in the war as possible. He even seems to want individual soldiers that he is carrying to the doctor to die. The worse for Russia, the better for Russia, he repeats, because it brings the day of reckoning nearer. All of this fighting for czar and country is obscurantism and reaction, he thinks. One can even imagine this ensign sabotaging the effort of the army, though at this time he merely tries to undercut the legitimacy of the war effort. If you ask me, he says, it's a great pity that Napoleon didn't beat us in 1812. His rule wouldn't have lasted long, and then we would have been free. We will explore this radical perspective in the next video. For now, let it suffice to say this. One can almost excuse the radical way of thinking in light of the colossal incompetence on display in the Russian army and the Russian regime. Here, beginning in Chapter 12, we learn more about the fictional Vortenstev. He entered war college after the humiliating Russian defeat in the Russo-Japanese War of 1905, when there was a push on the Russian general staff to modernize the army. As he was studying military science, he married and was happy for a while, but his family life grew stale, and he discovered that the only truly worthy emotions of man were civic duty, patriotism, a concern for all mankind. He seems happy to have escaped his wife as he headed to the front to help Solzhenitsyn reorganize the army. While at the general staff, Vortenstev was among the young Turks who read German military textbooks and recognized that the Germans were the proper model for the Russians that needed modern technology, modern organization, and alert, active minds. Here, Vortenstev. Only that closed fraternity of the general staff officers, and perhaps a handful of engineers as well, were conscious of the fact that the world, and Russia with it, was moving invisibly, inaudibly, and imperceptibly into a new era. That was the entire atmosphere of the planet, its oxygen content, its rate of combustion, the mainspring pressure of all its clocks had somehow changed. All Russia, from the imperial family down to the revolutionaries, naively thought they were still breathing the same old air, living on familiar ground. Only a handful of engineers and officers were gifted with perception to sense that the stars themselves had moved into new conjunctions. Oblivious to these changes, the Russians adhered to the feudal, or at least non-modern ways of war-making. When asked to bring its armies to bear as per its treaty obligations with the French, Russia doubled down and decided to attack Austria and Germany at the same time. This was the worst possible choice made at the level of politics or strategy for purposes of state. Zelensky, to flatter national honor, brought the army out to fight even before the date it was bound to attack, which compromised the army's readiness. It had not organized itself to wage modern war. To the Russians, Solzhenitsyn writes near the end of chapter 12, anything that wasn't cavalry or artillery was simply infantry. No supply trains, no medical corps, no transportation services, no spies or reconnaissance. While the strength of the Second Army was leaking away on those vulnerable, invisible radio waves in the impenetrable darkness of enemy territory, as Solzhenitsyn writes in the last words of chapter 13. We see another manifestation of this problem in chapter 14, where we are introduced to the son of the progressive school teacher that we met in chapters 3 through 9. She had not been happy to see her son join the army. Where did she go wrong, she thinks. Yet he was natural at commanding men, and he loves the peasants under his charge. His mother had always talked about loving peasants, but never talked to one, and washed her hands after she spent time with them. He was leading them and learning their names. Yet, due to the disorganization of the army, he and his corps were losing strength daily, marching and countermarching on nothing but hardtack for 2 weeks. As they are dejected, a Russian general rides by and yells at them, "The Germans can go by train if they like, but we Russians are tough. We travel on our own 2 feet and still beat 'em. Isn't that right, lads?" The men shout back, "Right, sir." And Yaroslav, the son of the schoolteacher, yells as well. German aviators, meanwhile, fly overhead to see what is going on, while the Russians save their planes for other days. The men enter the deserted German village and are amazed at its prosperity, electricity, 2-story brick homes, telephones, no smell of pig poop, nice paved roads instead of dirt ruts. The hardy men of this battalion become increasingly dispirited, hopeless, sullen, dejected, as they advance day after day on foot and without combat. Again, noticing this strength is crucial, but knowing its place is even more crucial. The error made in the Russian regime, Vortenstev identifies quite clearly as he meets yet another like-minded reformer, though not someone entirely of his mind, in chapter 16. Krymov and Vortenstev survey the available generals and find them wanting in some colorful language. The problem, however, is the Russians' inability to adjust. Hear what Vortenstev says. The people at the top still think that the spirit of the army will be the decisive factor. Zovorov thought so. Dogmorev, the victor of the Russian-Turkish War of 1877, thought so. So did Tolstoy. So why spend money on guns? As for fortresses, they're so out of date, they almost have unicorns in the stables. They have guns that fire black powder. Meanwhile, Samsonov's assessment of the situation is vindicated by events. The Germans are on his left or south, but his orders are still to march to the right or to the north. He knows that it is folly, but he does not defy orders. He hopes that the headquarters possess information that he doesn't have, the last great hopes of those who see tidal waves about to hit them. There was no overall plan, and there was no communication of an overall plan. Their objectives were small, tactical things. Hold this bridge, cut this road. This section ends with a story of General Nekvolodov, who had been ordered to take or hold a particular town that was already abandoned, and then ordered to pick up and go elsewhere where it was thought that the Germans were. The Russians are looking for the Germans, and Nekvolodov finally finds them in chapter 21, when he again receives orders to retreat, and is informed that the brigades behind him have already retreated. Nekvolodov is a simple Russian patriot, a lover of the peasants' ways, and he relies on the strength of Russian mores to see him through. He commands his men with this respect and this patriotism. In civilian life, he had authored a book for peasants, Tales from Russian History. Nekvolodov bemoans the dying Russia and hopes to revive her by bringing forward the idea of the fatherland in the breast of all Russians. He saw her faults. He had tried to fix them, but found himself swimming upstream against the feudal order. As chapter 21 ends, Nekvolodov is digging in for the inevitable German attack, and he is ordered to retreat. He wants to stay and fight, as do his men, but no one has their backs. So they withdraw, and this withdrawal leaves Samsonov open to the unimpeded blow from the right flank. These are the last words of chapter 21. The feudal order is decadent and not fit for the modern world. It is filled with those who dally, those who don't know or want to know, and those who hold their places in perpetuity. They lack the innovativeness of the Germans. War is one place it might be prudent to copy your enemies, for defeat as a nation can lead to unpredictable events. Solzhenitsyn has Vortenstev voice just such concerns. It only needed 2 or 3 defeats in succession for the backbone of the country to be put out of joint forever, and for a 1,000-year-old nation to be utterly destroyed. For that reason, the present war might either herald a great rebirth of Russia or the end of her altogether. The Russo-Japanese War of 1905 was the first such humiliating defeat. This knot would be the second.